Okay, this is the first part of a whole series of videos that I'm going to be doing on fuel and air systems on Optimax motors to try to give you folks some understanding of how they function and how to diagnose them. We're going to start right at the beginning on fuel starvation issues and how to identify them at as short a time as possible. First thing I'm always going to do is I'm going to pull the fuel filter. There's a special tool for this, by the way. That's what it looks like. It indexes into this castle. I've already loosened this one up so it turns real easy. If you try to do this with a screwdriver, you're probably going to break these ears off and damage it, or even worse, break the top portion off. I'll explain what causes that further after we get into here. So anyway, we're going to pull the oil, pull the fuel filter. I'm sorry. Get out of our way. Now I got to come over on the other side. So you can see in the bottom of that chamber where the fuel filter resided. If you shine a light down in there and look in the bottom, we need to know what's in there. If there's any debris at all, we try to identify it. Now, assuming you did have debris in there, the next thing I want to know is what's in the pulse pump that mounts on the side of the VST. So I'll pop the screws out of it and split it, and then I will look inside this chamber. And you should be able to see that this one is spotlessly clean, which means no debris is being passed from the fuel tank or the lines up into this chamber, which is a good thing. So that means we're probably not going to have to clean the fuel tank, though we probably should consider replacing fuel lines if they're more than 10 years old. And while we're talking about fuel lines, the gray lines that go from the primer bulb up to the pulse pump. From the tank to the primer bulb, you'll usually find a black hose which does not have an inner liner in it. The gray line does. If you can look really closely, right in the center of it, it'll be easier to see when you got a piece of line in your hand. Think of it like a two-ply tire. You've got a coating in the outside, and then you have a barrier liner inside that doesn't let any fuel penetrate the hose. Low permeation or no permeation type hose. That liner will be attacked by ethanol fuel and harden it up, especially on the early hose that has the red writing on it. The later hoses has blue writing. It's a far, far superior hose. The earlier line was a big problem. That barrier, the clear barrier, would get very, very hard, very, very brittle. Pieces of it would chunk and break out and end up in the pulse pump, and it would show up right here where the inlet comes in. This chamber might be in other chambers too. Now the problem with the pulse pump, to help you diagnose it, is usually what will happen with it is when the engine idles for a prolonged period of time, very low RPM, the VST will empty. You won't have enough volume at idle RPM to keep the VST full of fuel. It will deplete the fuel, the engine will stall. Then you're back there on the primer bulb, pumping it 15 or 20 times to refill it. Fire it back up, 10 or 15 minutes later, same thing happens again. Because when you put the boat on the pad, you elevate the RPM, the pump will pump more fuel because it's pulsing a lot faster, and the crankcase pulses are stronger at a higher RPM, so it's able to keep up, usually. In some cases, if there's a lot of restriction, you may have a high speed or under max power have a power loss, which can be caused by the pulse pump being full of contaminants. It could be caused by a fuel filter that is restricted. It could be caused by improperly installed line where somebody slides it on and they damage this inner liner in this hose, or contaminants in the fuel tank, or the anti-siphon valve on the fuel tanks. You have to find out where those problems are at. When installing this line, this is very important. Sometimes it's a very, very tight fit on these fittings. And the primer bulbs usually, on most of these applications, will be 3/8 on one side from the tank to the bulb and 5/16 on the other side from the bulb to the pulse pump. Guys attempt to just shove them on there. That's where a problem happens. It can wad up this inner liner that's inside here, bunch it up, close off the opening, and you've got a big restriction for the fuel. So take a cup of hot water, put it in the microwave, and get it really hot, almost boiling hot. Hold the hose in it for 15 or 20 seconds, then slide it over this fitting. Okay, now, if it's really tight fit, I found what can really help is a little 2,4-C lubricant on this area of a needle nose pliers. Push it straight in. Don't turn it sideways. Just push it in straight and rotate it back and forth gently. Don't go crazy with it. This will expand the end of the hose a little bit, making it much easier to start on a tight fitting. So before you couldn't start it, now it's large enough, it'll start on these edges, and as you, with it heated up so it's soft and flexible, now you can just kind of rotate it and push at the same time, push it all the way on, it will stretch easily. Cold, it's very difficult to, and it can damage that inner liner in that hose. So think about those things, and by the way, when I'm on these, I do not like those plastic clamps. And I do not like radius head zip ties on these. I use nothing but Oetker clamps. Just like this one here, I got a full set of Oetker clamps for everything. Same thing where I connect this to my pulse pump. Most guys recommend just putting a radius head zip tie on it, hold it the pulse pump. I've seen leakage at that point where it suck air or leak fuel. I'll put an Oetker clamp on there. Yes, they're a pain in the ass to get off, I get it. But a little trick on getting them off, if you use an ice pick, and when this is crimped up, there's kind of a hole in it. If you stick an ice pick or awl into that hole, you can then twist it sideways and it'll pop the clamp loose, and then you get them off fairly easily then. They're kind of a bear to try to cut with dikes or something like that. They're pretty tough clamps. Now, if fuel has sat in that tank for a long period of time and has not been treated, and a long period of time for untreated fuel would be 90 days. A year is totally unacceptable. In fact, a year is about the most age I would trust fuel, even if it is treated. But by that time, it's starting to go bad. It's losing octane. Octane's falling off. If fuel's starting to sour, I would not be wanting to run that through my Optimax motor. So consider those things. Okay, primer bulb, pulse pump, fuel line. Let's talk about the VST a little bit more. We talked about the contaminants in here, spotting those contaminants and trying to read where they came from to give us an idea of how far back we're going to go. If the pulse pump has contaminants in this area, you need to go all the way back to the fuel tank, replace all the hose. Don't just rebuild the pulse pump, put it back together. That problem will surely repeat. Now you're having to go through it again. Plus, you're going to have to go back, replace some fuel lines, replace the primer bulb, make sure there's no air leaks. Do it all at one time, get it over with. Make sure everything prior and including this pulse pump is in good shape. If this VST isn't kept full of fuel fuel pumps cannot do their job. All right, something else you need to know about, two things. You'll see this hose down here on all right, I pulled one side off. Each side has a fitting like this, as you see right here. Right out here where my finger is, there's a screw in there. If you loosen the screw, you can drain that chamber. Same thing on the other side. If you loosen the screw, it'll drain that chamber. I suspect this line is because it's under cal. If these don't seal good and it drips fuel, this hose is down here, it won't drip fuel into the cowling area to become a fire hazard. What is a huge fire hazard is this sensor. This is a water and fuel sensor. It has two pins in here. When you get continuity across those pins, electrical resistance of gasoline and water is different. There's water in there, you'll get a circuit across this, and this will set an alarm. If you have a MERT monitor or Diacom or something to read it, you'll see a code for water and fuel. These things have a habit of the epoxy getting soft over time. Again, this is suspected it's ethanol and gasoline attacking it, and it gets soft like bubble gum. So you push your fingernail on it, you'll feel the soft texture, rubbery feel to it. In real bad cases, if you pull on this, they'll pull right out of it. If this comes out when your boat's operating, the fuel in the VST dumps into the lower cowlings. A little spark and you've got a huge fire under your cowling. Could lose your whole boat as a result of that. Now, let's pop this apart so you can have a look inside of this thing. They're actually very simple. And when you're doing repairs on this stuff, try to break it down into small areas at a time. Yes, it can seem overwhelmingly complex, but if you break it down in small segments, small areas, it's far less intimidating. Okay, all the screws out. I've already had this apart, so it will come apart relatively easy. But sometimes they're stuck on, the cover can be stuck on pretty good. Sometimes you have to get a little space on it, get a screwdriver in here and help it up over here in this area where the high pressure line comes out of it, because that's where the hang up is. So you help it out a little bit to lift the whole assembly off. And the top cover, you'll see a float. When the fuel comes into this chamber and it fills it, out the center hole in the fuel filter, the fuel comes back up. It flows through a cross hole right here in this area. It goes down here in this area to the needle valve and seat. And as this float, as it uses fuel, this float goes down and it opens up the needle valve to fill this chamber. As the chamber fills up, the flow rises. When it comes all the way up to the level position, it shuts off the fuel. So no more fuel's been added. If it uses a little fuel, it'll drop down and keep it replenished. It doesn't go up and down violently normally. It's only moving as much as needed. At full throttle, it may be all the way down for maximum fuel flow into the VST, into the fuel system, or close to it. But it shouldn't be. Now, with the cover off, some things to take note of. On the top of the high pressure pump, you'll see this rubber seal. When it's a brand new part, it looks like a piece of 5/16 fuel line, which slides on here. The shape, the cone shape to it comes from in the top up here where that seal goes in place. It's a tapered hole. Over time, it will shape that into that cone shape. This is a failure point. Over time, these can split. You get a crack or a split in it, then the high pressure fuel coming out here to exit the top has a way to escape. So it comes out at this location, just dumps itself right back into the VST. But that means low pressure and low volume to the fuel rails then, if that occurs. It also causes fuel foaming in the VST. Foam fuel does not work very well. The fuel rails must have no aeration, no foam in that fuel at all. It needs to be very, very dense mixture coming through the fuel injectors. Then the fuel injectors will atomize it, which brings up another point. Right in the end here, where the fuel pressure return line goes in, you'll see the small hole right here. Okay, excess fuel that's in the rail, the pressure has to be controlled. The pressure regulator bypasses some fuel to be returned back into the VST. And it goes through that fitting and this grommet called the director. There's a brass nipple on the end of that return fuel line. This slides over it. Then everything slides into that hole. If this is missing, it will cause the fuel to be aerated where it returns right into the intake of the high pressure pump after the low pressure pump. That fuel will be foamed and aerated badly, which would get passed in the fuel rails, which can cause a high speed or high demand fuel starvation issue, bucking, surging, and things of that nature. So if you're having that type of problem, check, make sure it's still there, make sure it's not split or damaged as well. Low pressure pump lies right in the bottom. I hope I got that where you can see it. It lies crosswise in the bottom. And you'll see the retainer, plastic retainer, 2 Phillips head screws. You take that off, you lift up on this end. As you lift up, you pull out, and it will disconnect from where it's inserted down here by the high pressure pump. And before you pull the pumps, you'll need to cut this zip tie that sits up here on the top that holds the wire harness in place. And take note when you put back together, be sure to put that zip tie back on there, is it has to keep these wires centered in this space right here so that they don't get pinched or rubbed against these sides, causing the wires to chafe or short out. I don't think I mentioned the low pressure port yet. Right near where the high pressure return line comes, there's a Schrader valve fitting, the same as what's on your fuel rails. If you tap a gauge in at this point, you will be reading the fuel pressure right down here in this area, which is between the low pressure pump and the high pressure. So it gives you an idea of what the pressures are on the low pressure pump. At key on, you should see pressure jump up to about 25 psi. And when the pump shuts off, it's probably going to drop down, depending on Optimax or Pro XS, either 10 or 15 pounds of pressure and hold at that level. It should hold it for a very long time. Very, very, very little leak down. If you're diagnosing a starvation problem, if you monitor that low pressure pump while running the boat and you see that pressure falling off, it's not able to stay up there well above that 15 to 20 pound reading, then you probably have a problem on the low pressure side, such as a filter, restricted line, problem with your pulse pump, a problem with your low pressure pump. Now, that will also show up in the high side, but if it shows up in the low side, you got to fix that low side problem first, because the high side will not have the correct pressure unless you have the proper low side pressure and volume. It's all about volume. So always correct the low pressure side problem first before you criticize what you see on the high side. Guys, don't think about that. They do all the pressure testing on the fuel rails without knowing what the low side is, and that's important information to have to think through where the problem is coming from. I think I covered that. This should give you some understanding of how all this functions together and show you that it's really not a complicated system at all. Break it down into little packages. So now that we went through the supply side, our next steps are going to be going into fuel rail testing and over the fuel and air rail systems and air compressor. Thanks for watching.